Alright, so hey, this is James. This is another installment of my trip report 2.0 from the Hilton here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Let's see, I'll try to keep it shorter than last time. If I can do that, I don't know. So anyway, what do I want to talk about today? I mentioned in one of my previous clips there about the total cost of ownership of open source here in Ethiopia and in the developing world in particular, and how it could effectively be equal to a proprietary solution, largely due to a lack of human resources. But one thing that I found strange when interviewing all these vendors that we're looking at for CIFO was that a lot of them have implemented PHP and MySQL solutions. Like, in particular, essentially CMS systems, content management systems. I guess CMS systems is a little redundant. Anyway, so I found that kind of peculiar. If nobody can support it, then why are they implementing it? So, and I found actually folks building custom solutions in PHP. And MySQL. So, conflicting reports there. In fact, I think easily over 50% of the vendors we've interviewed, we've talked to, are implementing some PHP MySQL solution of some sort. So, I don't know. My initial thoughts about the TCO thing may not be so accurate. After talking to a number of other folks. So this was the first vendor that mentioned that. And we talked to 6 in total, and so the story really changed over the next day or two as we were interviewing folks. Let's see. Oh, just a quick little thing. Well, it's going to be related here. Amharic does not have a word for no. All right, there's this word Aideulleum, but that means there isn't. What you effectively have to do is turn verbs into negative forms to get to make this happen. So, for example, you don't say there is no. Aideulleum is a single word, and it's basically a form of the verb. What's the word I'm looking for here? Conjugation, is that the word? I don't know. Whatever. With there's like a prefix that prefix and a suffix that get across this sense of sort of the negative. So anyway, why am I talking about Amharic? Well, because it actually is kind of related to something. This lack of sort of negativity built into the language, or at least it's sort of difficult, at least for me, to say anything in a negative form. One of the criteria that we're using to analyze this vendors, looking for the most appropriate one, is references, right? So we ask for a list of people they've worked for, what the project was that they did, or the nature of the project. Give us a phone number and the name of somebody that we can talk to. So we're calling all of these references, asking them, pretty standard questions like, what was the nature of the job? Were you satisfied with the end product? Were they timely? Were they easy to work with? Blah, 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 blah. All the kind of standard stuff that you would ask. But we get nothing but really positive feedback. So I thought that was interesting, given the fact that there's no word for no in Amharic, and at least for me, creating sort of a negative sentence is kind of difficult. The other thing too, I think, is culturally, I guess the way that, and I've talked to a few folks about this, the way that references work. And to be honest, I'm not sure that it's significantly different anywhere else in the world, but references are usually friends, maybe even best friends. I mean, they could be family members too. I mean, so I guess a lot of business is probably secured or whatever through friends or family members, which nepotism, there's plenty of that in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. So not really surprised at that. But I guess for some reason I thought that maybe that in other places, back home, for example, that references might be a little more objective or something. But yeah, so it's interesting. So I feel bad for Waseni. She's making all these phone calls, and she just, they keep saying essentially the same thing. Oh, they're so great, blah 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 blah. If there's ever anything wrong, it's always not. It's not the, it wasn't the vendor's problem. It was, the organization's problem. They didn't know exactly what they wanted, or they, scope creeped or something. Blah 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 blah. Although there was this other interesting part to it. Not only, that you put your friends as references, but that perhaps the reason for this, like, over positiveness, over positivity, I don't know, that in some way, when you're giving a reference for somebody, especially for somebody who had worked for you before, what you're really interested in doing is giving them an opportunity to be successful, or to make money, I guess, at the very least, to get another job or something. And I guess that makes sense. If your references are your friends are looking out for you. Anyway, it's like I said, I just was thinking about this whole lack of a word for no thing and the positivity of the references and etc. So that was kind of interesting. It's a cultural kind of a reflection on the local or Ethiopian culture. And like I said, maybe in some ways it's really not so different anywhere else. And the last thing I'm just going to talk about quickly, I've been having a really hard time accessing Blogger from here in Ethiopia. Sometimes, most of the time I can't even get anything. It just times out, right? Sometimes I can get to the home page and I can maybe log in and see my dashboard, maybe even go to start creating a post, but once I start creating a post and it tries to do the autosave thing, it can't connect anymore, and I can never save anymore. So I just did some quick research, online, and I found that, a few years ago they had actually blocked, or they were filtering access to Blogger. I think it was during, an election, and they were worried about, political dissent, etc. They also at that time, if I'm not mistaken, they removed the SMS service. So I thought I had seen something. I remember people talking about, SMS in Ethiopia being somehow related to, the new millennium, and so with the new millennium they offer this new service. But then I thought I read somewhere that they actually had SMS before that, but then took it away or something. I don't know. Either way, there's obviously a history of filtering, blocking, monitoring, telecommunications and media here in Ethiopia. That makes sense. It's all completely state-controlled, state-owned. I don't know, they can do essentially whatever they want. But, it's interesting because within the country, there's fairly decent connectivity, right? And they always talking about, wiring schools to each other and blah, 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 blah. So, and that's great, right? So connecting folks within the country. But I think there's more benefit to connecting beyond the country, right? So connecting to the global, discourse, the global, pool of research, information, etc. A lot of what we're doing here is, trying to bring, current practices, current research, etc. to Ethiopia and in many other places to the other countries where we work. And that's, largely because it's just new information, and maybe these folks don't have access. But part of the reason they don't have access is maybe because they're not connected, to the world. So Ethiopia is rightly so very proud of their history, and having never been colonized, with the exception of a few years during the First World War with, and I guess Italy, was sort of occupying for a while. But there's also this sort of insularity, and I'm just wondering, what's the impact of that? What could potentially happen here in Ethiopia, if connection, two-way connection to the world outside, was more simply made or something. They've done a lot of great work here, but what could they potentially do if they allowed more free and open communication with the world? Who knows? Yeah, it's my thought. I'm at 9:55. Going to cut it here before I hit 10 minutes.